Ready?
Can you state your name, please, and what state you live in?
My name is Larry Nemec. I live in Wausau, Wisconsin.
What foreclosures have you experienced? You've had multiple foreclosures. Can you briefly describe each one of those?
My wife and I lost a commercial shopping center, strip mall, an office complex that consisted of 2 buildings. We ended up losing our vacation home, which was set up to be our retirement home, and all in one package to one particular set of financing. It was like a domino effect. Our first loan was with Countrywide in the commercial buildings. I was supposed to get was looking to pull out some equity of my property, and we had quite a bit because we had sold some other property and did a 1031 exchange, and plus we had put other cash, and the properties were worth considerable amount more than what we paid for them, as just because of the work we did to them. I built the office buildings from scratch. I leased out all my buildings were leased out 100% at the time we did this loan. I was looking to pull between $200,000 and $300,000 in equity out of my properties. I went to Countrywide. They agreed that they were going to give me the money that I wanted, and I had a deal with a broker, Johnson Capital out of California, another one, and then Countrywide. I spent 6 months between attorneys, accountants, MIA appraisers. I had to give them a security deposit for them to move ahead and do the loan. That was $45,000 cash. I was supposed to get that back and never did. By the time I was done financing, I had to bring my Florida house into the financing and get a separate loan on that with a company called Stone Creek Funding. That was in 2006. They went out of business in 2007. Somehow the commercial buildings were with Countrywide. They bundled them up and sold them. The house, I don't know whatever happened from my investigation. Stone Creek never did sell the loan, but somehow I ended up with a servicer, which was Countrywide, which I would have, after the problem I had with the commercial loan, I would have never went ahead with it. And had I known at the closing table, I'd have walked away. Unfortunately, by walking away, I would have lost $200,000 I gave these people to do the loan because I'd have had to forfeit everything.
Now, are you in a judicial state?
I'm in a judicial state. The property, in both cases, the commercial properties were in Wisconsin. The home was in Florida. So I dealt with, first of all, I tried to work with the bank. I contacted them. The servicers of the loan, they wouldn't give me much information. I had an attorney trying to help me. We tried to offer in a commercial loan. The loan was for $3.2 million.
How did you get into trouble with making the loan payments? You had a good business going too.
Well, the buildings they were positive cash flow, and I had a tenant that was a Mexican restaurant that I found out were bringing illegals up from Mexico to work in there. There was a basement in the bottom of the restaurant, and they were actually bringing people in, and they were sleeping in the basement here illegally. And then I started seeing illegal activity. They were having close the restaurant, and then they would have dances, and they'd bring all the local people that they knew that were here, the immigrants or illegals, and they'd have a party. But the thing was, they stopped to the point where they weren't paying their rent. And then I started looking into their business because they were always busy. They had great food. It was a good restaurant. And I kept seeing people coming in and talking to the hostess. And I found out later what they were doing is they were giving him money for bringing him over here, bringing him up here from Mexico. And last straw that I had, as I was looking into it, was I caught one of their waiters selling drugs in the parking lot of my shopping center. And that I couldn't stand for because I had great tenants.
So you tried to, you evicted them, but what happened?
I notified the servicer of my loan. At that time, it had gone from Countrywide. Wells Fargo was the servicer. Wells Fargo told me that I needed to contact them before I evicted a tenant. And I didn't understand that. And they said, well, you better read your contract, which was about 8 inches thick. And they said, but that's okay. We're going to help you. We're going to put you with a company that will work with you. They're called L&R Partners. Are out of Miami, Florida. They have the availability to let you skip payments, or you do it, work with you, readjust your loan and get this thing straightened out. And I said, well, we shouldn't really have a problem. And they said, well, I'll tell you what are you going to do at the restaurant? I told them our intentions, from what the realtors told me, is keep it open as long as you can and try to find a buyer or someone to take it over, because an empty restaurant that went out of business within a year or so, people will get a bad impression, think something's wrong with it. Well, we took it over. They told me, Wells Fargo told me I didn't have to make a payment for a month. They would work with me. Well, all of a sudden I find out when L&R Partners took it over, the man told me they're starting the process. And I didn't know what he meant by the process, but what I found out, it was the foreclosure process. They used the month that Wells Fargo told me I didn't have to pay to start foreclosure. But we tried to work with them. We tried to pay them off. My loan was $3.2 million. I offered them $3,450,000 to take the money and walk away, and they turned me down.
That was after they started the foreclosure, right?
After they were starting the foreclosure.
Did you find forged or facially invalid documents or assignments?
As we got into it and started looking at the documents, we found out that the documents were forged. They were robo-signed, and they were turned in and filed after the bank filed their foreclosure.
Did you have any expert investigator or witness that?
At the time, I didn't know anything. I was as dumb as a box of rocks.
But the lawyer thought that these assignments endorsements were false. Was it?
It was so early into securitization and these type of loans, nobody really could figure them out. They didn't understand them.
What year was it?
2007, 8.
I see. Okay.
My attorney didn't understand anything other than, we found out when we offered to pay him off, we found out we had $1 million prepayment penalty that I had no idea that was there. And trying to get rid of the commercial properties, I had buyers for him. I had a buyer that had sold his property. He had the money, cash in hand. He had just bought the shopping center, paid me enough money to pay off all my other loans. But I found out was cross-collateralized in the loan, which there were two separate loans. I paid different fees, they different appraisals, but they tied the two of them together. And then the bank came back and said, "We got to sell them both." Well, the man only wanted the one, and we tried to find a buyer for the other one, and we could find one for one of them, but we couldn't find a buyer for the other. But the shopping center was in an area that was up and coming. I had an LOI to put a Walgreens store in the front of the property, which had taken that property up to well over $10 million in value. And they did a study. We were ready to move forward. At the same time, they had me in receivership. They took the income from my shopping center. The loan I had in a house in Florida originally had a $270,000 mortgage. Now I had a $400,000 mortgage, and the payments were almost $4,000 a month. On a house, we probably spent 6 weeks a year at that time. We weren't quite ready. That's why we were refinancing, was so we could start using the home, move into it as our primary eventually. And That was the whole idea of doing this financing package.
Mhm.
Well, I got to the point where with the income that I lost from the office building and shopping center, that they had a receiver that was collecting all the payments every month. And the house being almost $4,000 a month, I went to the bank and tried to get the payments reduced. And they said they could do a modification. Well, they started foreclosure on the Florida house. I've
So
already
you were in foreclosure then with both properties?
all three properties.
All three. So were the entities that came into foreclose, were they purporting that they were trustees for trusts?
Yes, they were trusts. All of them they were trusts. The loan.
They said they were
that I-
trusts, but they were said they were trusts, but did you have any evidence that they weren't actually trusts?
No, at that time, like I said, box of rocks. I didn't know what a trust really understood, how that worked or what they were.
Well,
I-
when did you start realizing that these trusts might not actually be trusts and the trustees not
I,
not
I,
trustees?
I realized that when I started doing research and started talking to people. And over the years, I've talked to many experts and many people and realized what these things really are. And they're nothing but a Ponzi scheme.
Was that
And
was that after your the foreclosures actually went through and were completed?
well,
There was a final
I
judgment, or
was,
just curious?
yeah, I was trying to reach out to Countrywide. They told me talk to Merrill Lynch. I reached out to Merrill Lynch, who they basically, I spoke to a vice president from there, said they'd try to help me, but it was L&R Partners that had it. He told me L&R Partners financial was in bad financials. They probably would take a payoff. And L&R Partners, all their intentions were to foreclose, which they did. And then they came back and they tried to sell them back to me. Well, at that time, Dodd-Frank kicked in. And for me to buy back my properties for 3.2 million, I had to come up with 25%, which was $650,000, which I didn't have. And my equity and the money I put into the properties, that's where it was sitting. And I couldn't use that. It didn't make any difference. The value appraisal, I had to come up with the down payment. So I couldn't even buy my own properties back.
Did you ever get any evidence that the entities foreclosing upon you were actually the parties that were owed the debt?
The only evidence I got was when they foreclosed, they took the property out of the trust and put them in an LLC. And it was the LLC that foreclosed on us. It wasn't the trust. And I don't know how they transferred that. In fact, I believe that was even a legal transfer because there's no way, they couldn't even, I wanted to know who I owed the money to, who made the decision on my loan, not the servicer. I wanted to talk to that person face to face, find out how much I got to pay them and get on with my life.
You mentioned that you actually asked that question in court, in bankruptcy court.
Yes.
Can you explain more?
Well, when we went through to go further with the story in a bankruptcy court, when I brought that up, I was talking about the Florida house mainly because we filed bankruptcy only because an attorney advised us, because the bank that was servicing the loan, the Bank of America, on the house in Florida, we're talking, not the commercial. That was separate entity. The Bank of America, the Florida Attorney General put out a letter. It says, before you give up your house in bankruptcy, you should find out that make sure you're giving the house to the proper party. I asked for information and I got a second assignment of mortgage, which was different than the one they used to get to foreclosure. See, the documents that they used to get to foreclosure on a house in Florida, when they filed their complaint, they didn't have anything that showed the Stone Creek Funding, which was a lender for the house, that they transferred it to anybody. It was listed as Stone Creek Funding as a mortgagee, and
Who
There-
came in to foreclose? What was the name of the party that came in to foreclose?
On the Florida house, it was CWABS 2006-23. Bank of New York Mellon as trustee. That's who foreclosed on the house. The commercial properties was a different, the entity that foreclosed was an LLC, which was Rib Mountain, and one property, Rib Mountain Lane LLC, Rib Mountain Drive LLC, and the other was Post Road LLC. There were 3 foreclosures. Okay.
And they were all trusts. They were all
They were all,
trustees for
well,
trust.
they were trusts, but they took the commercial property out of the trust and put it in LLC. And they didn't put the property, Countrywide didn't put the property into the trust and file it in Wisconsin County records until after they filed their foreclosure.
Which is illegal.
Yeah, which is illegal, exactly.
Right.
So what I had is going to the Florida house. We were in 2008, we got notice of foreclosure from a law firm called Cash Schuler, and an attorney by the name of Michelle Gilbert Garcia was filed a complaint. In her complaint, she stated that she had an assignment of mortgage and an allowance that were attached to the complaint, showing that the Stone Creek Funding, the lender, transferred this through MERS to this trust. Okay, the trust was, like I said, CWABS 2006-23. Well, Stone Creek went out of business in 2007. This assignment was signed and drafted in 2008. But it wasn't attached to the complaint. Well, we went through with the bank and we got them, they dropped the foreclosure, and Countrywide was a servicer at the time. And they said, give me $7,000 for a fee and we'll do a modification for you. And I gave them the money and they never did the modification, or we never got anything other than sign some papers. Well, this happened again in 2009. They started over.
A new foreclosure, another foreclosure?
The foreclosure in 2009, the second one. But that foreclosure was by a law firm that was Greenspoon Martyr. It was a different law firm. Okay, and they didn't have anything attached showing that the trust had owned the mortgage or didn't have anything, and they filed a complaint. Well, at the time I was dealing with the bank or Countrywide, and they were working on a HAMP loan for us. And of course,
For that property?
For that property, yes. And we were ready to go to get this HAMP loan. We supposedly, well, we were approved because we got notification, but they went ahead at the same time and they went and foreclosed. Well, we live in Wisconsin, the house is in Florida. The court was in Florida. And what they did is they submitted, Greenspoon Martyr submitted an assignment and a lawns that was drafted by Gilbert Garcia, the first attorney. And they submitted that to the court as the document showing the transfer from Stone Creek Funding to the trust. Well, the trust in the pooling and servicing agreement and the list did not list that loan as part of that trust. It wasn't in their prospectus. It doesn't show up on that loan anywhere. So anyways, they got a judgment based on the fact that we didn't come to court. Well, we didn't go to court because we were expecting this modification. This was in 2010. Okay, well, we went round and round until 2011. Greenspoon Martyr and a new attorney that came in, her name was Tanel Shipwash. She went ahead and filed a foreclosure, or for the sheriff's sale. They had the foreclosure. They were going for the sheriff's sale and they had a date scheduled. I'm talking to the Bank of America, wondering about this, why we hadn't got this modification, why these things haven't gone on. And they're telling me they're working on it. They'll give it to us. They told us this was November 9th, 2011. And they told us we were approved for the modification. Contact the attorneys. Attorneys didn't know anything. And they said, well, tell you what, we're going to have the sale anyways. And they had a sale. We were down in Florida, my wife and I alone. We didn't know what to do. We turned around and sold half the furniture in the house. And we had beautiful furniture because the first house we had was a model home, and we kept all the furniture and added to it, sold our golf cart, almost gave everything away. And we put the rest in storage thinking we're going to get this straightened out with the bank. So we went home. As we were driving home, the bank called us and said, get back in the house, put that stuff back in there. And we said, we have to have something in writing. We almost had an accident coming out of the mountains. We were in Tennessee. It was so stressful that we almost smashed the car. And we ended up stopping. We got down to the bottom of the mountain, stopped at a hotel. And during the night, I had an attack. It just finally freaked out. And we got home. I continued to keep working with the bank. They went in the meantime, changed the locks, put locks on the doors, put signs in the window. This foreclosed house is by the Bank of America. In January of that year, I get a letter in the mail from the court giving me the deed back, and no explanation, just the deed, and basically gave us. I didn't know what to do, so I went to an attorney, and this man told us that we should give the house to the bank, move on with our life, and just go on. That was his advice. We paid him. I went through chapter 13. We went, time to go to court. We went into court. By that time, the bank, our attorney general from Florida put out a bulletin that said, make sure you're giving the house to the right party. So I just asked that at the case. My attorney thought that I was trying to fight the foreclosure, and I wasn't. I just wanted to make sure. He up and quit on me right through the foreclosure. We had paid him. I'd gone through everything I could, and we ended up having to complete the foreclosure on our own, and it got dismissed, got thrown out, because the Bank of America was objecting to our plan. Bank of America had nothing to do with they were the servicer calling all the shots on the loan. Bank of New York Mellon was the one that was foreclosing. I contacted them.
Wait a second, you said your adversary action got thrown out? Is that what you mean?
Yes, it did. Yes, the chapter 13 got thrown out, the whole thing. And the judge was going to have a hearing, but the bank's attorney objected and said that this should be under part of Rucker-Feldman, and that the bankruptcy court, the judge in the court wanted to make sure the bank came up with the documents. And I think the judge knew what was going on, but her hands were tied because they claimed the Rucker-Feldman. And of course, they had those documents back in a default judgment that they submitted to the court. And so in the meantime, we went back to them. The bank went through, on this house foreclosure, 7 law firms, 32 attorneys. A couple of their attorneys said they wish they were working for me. And a couple of them felt pretty bad. But I didn't know that I owned the house all this time until we agreed. I got an agreement with the Bank of America. And of course, my congressman was working with me. His office was 3 doors down from mine. Plus, he knew my family, and they really were working hard. And we got a VA loan approved, and we finally got a number out of the bank to be able to pay them to walk away. And they agreed to sell us a house, and they gave us 3 days to come up with the money. And I said, well, I haven't been in the house in 3 years. I don't know what it's like. And they said, well, we need to get in the house to do an appraisal. Do you mind if we go in there? I said, what are you asking me for? You have locks on the doors. He said, well, no, you own the house. In the meantime, they're not paying the HOA fees, and they're accumulating against my wife and I. They're not paying, taking care of the lawn. They got the neighbors wild, the pools, and the disaster. And anyways, we went down there and found out there was water damage and mold in the bedroom walls. There had been a hole in the roof where they got two guys came in and threw some tar on it to plug the hole. And I mean, this home was brand new home. And it was a nightmare. And we worked with them. We got everything straightened out and tried to get this thing so we could buy it back. We had financing approved. I mean, we never had a problem getting the financing. We went to the bank and the banker said one thing to the bank's attorney: "Who are we paying off?" The attorney went, they didn't know. But found out, to look back, that we realized what happened is we found out that the bank, they couldn't sell it back to us because of the title. If they went and did a title search to see who they pay off, they'd have found out that the trust wasn't really in the county records as being the owner of and the assignment of mortgage. In the bankruptcy, we asked for an assignment of mortgage. They provided a second assignment mortgage that was dated 5 years after they foreclosed on the house, and they submitted that in the county records as being the assignment of mortgage. We tried to buy the house. We filed a complaint with the judge. Turns out the attorney that ended up, in the end of the day, that ended up with the house was the attorney that drafted the original fraudulent document. It was her law firm. She knew that she was involved in, of course, the National Settlement Agreement had all kinds of things in there about attorneys that knew the documents were forged or fraudulent, were supposed to report it to the court, which she totally didn't. I brought that up to the judge. We had a hearing scheduled. The HOA was the one that scheduled it because there were fees owed to them that the bank never paid. And we showed up for the hearing. The bank didn't show up. The servicer, Bank of America, their attorneys didn't show up for the hearing. And when the judge dismissed the case, and we were bringing up the fact of the fraudulent documents, and it was brought to the judge that Marion County Sheriff's Department was investigating, and there was a letter in the file from our congressman to the FBI demanding that they investigate and the fraud on in this case. And the judge basically ignored all that. And his question, he dismissed it, and then they came back and said they missed the hearing because the HOA contacted them stating that they were calling off the hearing and postponing it. And they sent a letter they sent a fax in at 6 o'clock night before telling them that they were canceling it, but never notified me. And then we don't know how they notified the other law firm, except the fact that the HOA, one of the attorneys that worked for the HOA firm, I filed a complaint against her because she perjured herself in my bankruptcy by doing an affidavit stating she was in possession of the original note and mortgage on the day that the property was foreclosed, when she wasn't even working for the law firm. And we had provided that information. There were a lot of things. And then we found out that talking to the bank in New York Mellon, who was a trustee, and they told me they did not own my loan, even though the assistance of Bank of America, the servicer, that they did. And then I made, I don't know, I've probably made 500 phone calls trying to work everything out and trying to get answers. Until I watched the con, I had no idea why the FBI did not investigate. I don't know what happened, and I found out that they were shut down. I knew the FBI was given $196 million to investigate mortgage fraud, but they thought that was a low priority and use the money for other things, which I thought was a misappropriation of funds. I went to my state attorney general and asked them what they did with the settlement money and why they didn't investigate mortgage fraud, because they all got money and they were part of it. And the money went in the general fund.
So you did go to various government organizations to complain. You went to the FBI, correct?
I went to the FBI. I went to the DOJ. The DOJ assigned me my own attorney, who told me I should get an attorney. And they said they don't help anybody. They don't help individuals. I talked to the FTC. I talked to 2 congressmen, 2 senators. I spoke to the White House. I sent them. They sent 2 letters. The CFPB has 16 complaints that were filed either by myself or on my behalf by either senators, the FTC, the White House twice, all requesting that they investigate. And all I was told by the ombudsman from the CFPB was I should have made my house payment. I said, excuse me, I don't understand what you're talking about. You tell me who I'm supposed to pay. Because the judge asked me the same question. Sir, when was the last time you made a house payment? And I should have told him on my house that I just made one 2 weeks ago on my house up here. But on that house, I said, Your Honor, I don't know who I'm supposed to pay. And he was kind of bewildered. And he said, well, you don't know? I said, no, sir. Okay, I will let you know, what my rule is going to be. He had already dismissed the case. He reinstated it. And of course, at this point, he turned around and gave the house to the bank. That's pretty much the end of it. I've spoken to many people. So I just have to, like I said, I'm very blessed. My wife is, in all this time we've been dealing with breast cancer, other issues in the family. And I mean, we're being involved in what I found in my conversations with people all over the country. I think there's a lot of people a lot worse than we are, but I have to get this out that, these people are dishonest, period.
What do you think should happen?
Well, I think there should be an investigation. I think all foreclosures should stop. I think everyone should go before they foreclose, sit down at the arbitration table and talk it out. And don't keep passing. I've had probably 12 different case managers from Countrywide Bank of America alone. I have a recording where they told me then and showed me a voucher that said they bought my loan. And then yet I have another guy that said, no, they never owned my loan. Nobody knows what's going on. And these people that work there as day-to-day people, they're just told, what to do. And they're told what to say. And I mean, I provided them with the prospectus with every loan that was in there. And I said, you find my loan in there. And I said, it's not in this trust. And they can't, they don't respond. They just all of a sudden turn you over to someone else. So I think that there's got to be more upfront honesty. I think I think people have lost their homes to the fraud. They should be reimbursed or made whole. And I think the bank should be responsible. And the people that, that are going through foreclosure, I mean, why would you foreclose on someone and then turn around and offer to rent the house back to them? There's been many cases, I've read many articles that, the people were renting their house from Black Knight or whoever the company is that buying these houses at discounts, and they're paying more money than they paid when they owned the house. How can they expect them to pay that kind of rent when supposedly they got behind in their mortgage? I mean, these people they're not deadbeats. And that's the stigma that they want people to realize. Well, I'm not a deadbeat. I was a very, very successful businessman. I owned 2 insurance agencies. I built 3 office complexes. I reinvested everything back into them. And just by fraud, in plain crookedness, they were taken away. And it's not right. And I mean, I had the capability and knew there were people that, I could have everything right from the beginning. And someone else, I mean, my property sold for peanuts. My office buildings, I will say, were sold by L&R Partners through auction.com to my buyer's real estate agent. The two office buildings were worth $1.4 million. My buyer's agent that was representing me, so supposing my friend, bought the two of them for $200,000.
Do you think there should be criminal indictments?
Absolutely, no question. I mean, come on. If I walked into a Bank of America and I said, with a note and says, give me your money, I mean, you'd have guns a-blazing, you'd have the FBI, the police, you'd have everybody coming there willing to arrest me and throw me in jail. But yet a banker can turn around and say, here, sign this. And all of a sudden, what am I signing? Don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. And you get to the point, you're not educated, you're not an attorney. And when attorneys can't understand it, or if you get attorneys that do understand it, and they go after them and they just bar them. And you got judges sitting on the bench that turn around and they rule in favor of these people because their retirement plans are invested in these banks. Boy, I could, I mean, I've seen that, and I sat in a couple of cases with an attorney. They're trying to disbar Bruce Jacobs, and I've sat in a couple of the hearings that he's had, and I just cannot believe that people can be that brash. I mean, Bruce is just fighting for people that need help. Kelly Bolsucker, she was just disbarred permanently. She won in some cases, and they went after her. And Mark Stopa is another one. And if they go into foreclosure, I was told by one attorney to fight my commercial foreclosure, it was going to cost me $250,000, and it wouldn't guarantee I'd win. I didn't know what I would have done. I mean, they destroyed my insurance businesses. They destroyed so many things, and yet, we're here. We're supposed to say that we live in a great place, and we're supposed to we sit back and we watch these people fight over, the politics. The politicians are, everybody can do better, and the next one can do better. They're all terrible. None of them they do anything. And that's the thing that frustrates me. I served my country. I was in the Army Reserves for 6.5 years. I was in there because I was drafted, not because I wanted to come forward and volunteer. They told me I had to. So I figured that when I needed help from the government, because I did my job, went in, didn't complain, maybe they could help me out. No, they don't. That's the problem.